So I'm Elizabeth Bischof, for those who really didn't get to hear my name earlier. I am from Elgeyo Marakwet. I come from a community that is known to be not the cattle rustling, but the highlands. I know most of you know Elgeyo Marakwet mostly from cattle rustling, but I come from the highlands. But in any case, I come from a very an amazing community. I grew up. I was born in 1966, so you can imagine those days. People still wonder sometimes, how did I know the way to Nairobi from this village where I grew up? I grew up in a family of great farmers. My parents were the first commercial farmers in North Rift. So my parents or my family were among the first community in North Rift to get merino sheep, and also my father was known to focus mainly on maize growing and sunflower. And I grew up in I would say, a very progressive, very very fortunate family. And that's also how I got into good education, because my family really valued education. So I grew up in this small village. We are very successful farmers, very proud of what we were doing. That really is the foundation of what Bdelo is. It's the identity, it's the sacrifices that my parents made to really be successful. It was through farming. So I was fortunate to go to high school or to secondary school. I went to St. Bridget's in Kitale, where I did my 4 years of secondary school. And then I was fortunate, I went to Luak Girls in Bondo in Nyanza. And I was so inspired through these journeys, because I managed to go out of my community to other communities. It was the first time when I went to high school to meet a Luya. I'd never met a Luya. I went to Kisumu, I had never met a Luo. So that connection itself opened my mind. I remember the first day in Luak, because they used to serve mbuta, it's a Nile perch fish. I was just so devastated, because I'd never eaten, fish. So, but those experiences were amazing. I met wonderful people that have been my friends all these years, and it opened always my world. It broadened my world. Then I went to Kenyatta University, where I did my bachelor's. And then I was fortunate to be selected to go to the US as an exchange student in 1990. Just before even I graduated, I was really fortunate. There was a program that was taking young people to go for exchange. You go and do voluntary work. So I was very fortunate. I went to Cleveland, Ohio. I worked in various organizations in public and private. And my husband, Daniel, that's where we met. He was an exchange student from Switzerland. And so it happened that when he came, his family were not ready with his room. So they asked my family to host him. So it was kind of like a blessing in disguise that his room was not ready, so he could meet me. So we met very young at that time in 1991. And I was then fortunate also to stay on after my program to go for master's degree. So I did my master's in management. I graduated in 1993. And at that time, Daniel also had introduced me to Switzerland. So I thought, so I said, okay, I go and try to go and see how Switzerland is. And finally, things became what they are today. We got married, and I lived in Switzerland then for close to 20 years before we relocated. But in that time, I worked for various companies. I was very fortunate at then. I worked for General Motors, which is an American company. They were starting their regional office in Switzerland. So I was hired. I worked there for 15 years. And then unfortunately they closed, but I moved on to several other international companies like Alstom. Alstom is known for high-speed trains. So I worked there as their project manager for international operations. And finally, the last opportunity was with Echo. Echo is the agricultural company. It's an American company that manufactures farm equipments like Valtra and also Massey Ferguson. I think you know the major brands here in Kenya, Massey Ferguson. So I was hired, and I was fortunate because of my background then. They were looking for somebody who has familiarity with Africa. So I was their favorite choice to go to come and set up the Africa Middle East office in Cape Town. So I was transferred to come to Africa. I decided then, but all the while, I've been thinking of coming back home. And Daniel knows it, and he was just getting tired. But this opportunity came, and he said, let's go. Because I wanted to come back. My parents were aging, and our legacy as really successful farmers was kind of also aging with them, and there was risk that they would ultimately just go with them, and it somehow did. But now for the product, when we were exchange students in the U.S., every Friday we were asked to bring something special. Where they had potluck dinner, like you bring something from your community. Now I didn't know. I did not have anything because ugali. How the heck do I bring ugali and mursik? That we only know the sour milk and the ugali. I thought of rice, but then my Indian colleagues brought the curry, so I didn't have anything. But the most impressive thing was the Mexican colleagues. Every Friday they brought something really unique. They would bring quesadillas. I would go and say, what is it made of? Maize. The next week they bring nachos. What is it made of? Maize. Bell started ringing. As we only know one way of eating maize. Ugali, uji, na kuchoma. Sindia. That was it. I was so amazed by the Mexicans, how they could create just amazing products. So I said, where do I get them? They say, get them in the supermarket. They are already global brand. Nachos are known globally. Quesadillas, tacos, and it's all maize-based. That stuck in my mind for those 20 years I was in Switzerland, because my family were predominantly maize farmers in the North Rift. And it really pained me that the value of maize, the pride of maize was literally going down. In fact, our children are not proud to eat ugali. Ugali is just like the last option because we have not professionalized it. When I went to Switzerland, I saw what the Italians do. They do a form of ugali, but they call it gnocchi because it's made from wheat, but it's just a mush, that's just made and then extruded into gnocchi, and it's a worldwide known food. We did not be creative with our foods. So I was so inspired in this exchange program that it became life and death for me. So fortunately, when I was transferred to the Africa operation, Daniel came we have two daughters who have also been instrumental in this. They have been very strong for us. They've been encouraging, because most of the time I would be gone and they would be with their father, and they remained really strong together. I think that one of the really benefit that I have is a strong family, a husband and two daughters who saw my dream. I mean, it was irritating sometimes for them, but what could they do? They had to stick with their mother and their wife. So, and I'm really grateful for them. One of our youngest daughter is already involved with the company. She's our HR guide at the moment. The Gen Zs, they see everything different from us, which is good because they bring sometimes new ideas, new ways of doing things. So the journey to Bdelo is really inspired by the Mexican way of serving their maize. And I thought that how can we diversify the value of our maize so that it's not just ugali, and ugali is not even a prideful food, because we see today, if you go to the fast food restaurants, to the major supermarkets, or you see McDonald's, you get KFC, you see there is nothing that is Kenyan. We have not taken pride in our Kenyan food. By the way, when I think of Mudokoi and Mokimo, it breaks my heart that we don't have a Mokimo Mudokoi Express restaurants. Ladies, in the food, we can have our own McDonald's, but this will be Mokimo Mudokoi. Because I started Mudokoi in Kawangware. Mudokoi is actually the most flexible food you can have on earth. And some of the things that we have, we don't have it here. But what I'm saying is, I was so inspired to look at what we have. And I remember when I was in Marakwet, because maize was rare in the part where I grew up. So we used to thicken our ugali with everything and nothing. For example, we used to make ugali wimbi, we used to make ugali viazi, because the maize was rare and expensive. So we had to thicken it with what we have. But the best part was the crust. And this is what you're eating today. It is that crust, because we thickened it with everything and whatever we found. So this, what you are eating today, was inspired by that. Now to finish, because I know you have many questions, and maybe you have also questions. So Bdelo was inspired by a heritage that I realized later on was actually good and valuable, because I was happy to run away from Marakwet to go to US, but then I realized there is more wealth at home than what is out there. So it's a struggle, but I think that that is where we are. I will take the next question.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So most of us ladies, when you get that chance to go out, even out of our counties, we don't want to come back. So it's inspiring. You traveled, then came back. So just want to take us through the journey of now the investment into the business. How was it? Because I know there's a 15 million investment somewhere. How did you get it? Then to date, have you reached somewhere where you're saying you can still take a loan, or you're good as a business?
Now, really, this operation is fully funded by our own savings, by our own security. So we are almost like naked at this point. We used all that we had, because such a project, it's very difficult, and it was difficult to get somebody to buy into it, especially because there are so many other snacks in the market. We had to really show why anybody would be interested. And it was impossible to get funding, because everybody wanted to see, financiers, they want the security of their money. So all this was mostly financed by ourselves. I was working part-time, as I mentioned. We started in 2010. He was setting up, I was working. I didn't leave work so that I could bring in the money while he's setting up and building everything. And also because it takes so long to build such an operation until you're in the market, until you even get return. The payment in our market is almost 120 days. Those days it was forever, because they had no pressure. Then obviously in 2015, when Nakumat fell, we fell totally with them, because it was one of our major distributor. They went down with us. So again, I had to go out. I left the family and went to look for a job, worked for another 10 years to recoup the money again, and just to get things going. So it's never been easy, because we are in a industry that is so difficult to vouch for the brand or the product or the value proposition. Because everybody, we know, in fact, for us, it's tough because this brand is a niche, it's a high end, it's expensive, so it's not for the mass. So really to get anybody to agree that the margin is so little, and the even bank interest here, 15%, 20%, that means you factor on your product already just 20% for the interest. Now, the cost of operations, even just licensing alone, the permits and licenses, we have to pay for this operation close to $500,000 every year, just for licenses and all that. And at the same time, it's not only the license you pay, the hours that you go. For NEMA, we take almost 50 hours, traveling from here to Nairobi on a daily basis. So this is where the challenge is with these kind of operations. We have our own savings. We have risked it enormously. And we just hope that God will help us. And at the moment, we are not even yet at break even because of continuous challenges in our market. We know now with imports, they are very cheap. Most of the industries that are in our sector, they sometimes maybe import their raw material, it's cheaper. They are not using the method that we use, which is less expensive for them. So we're not very, but we're hanging it on there. We're holding on to it. We're looking at other opportunities, for example, export, which we are still really struggling with. We did have a possibility to export to Bahrain. We were going to have a third-party manufacturer that was going to manufacture for us. Unfortunately, COVID came and they closed, and we lost a 40-foot container that we had shipped to Bahrain. So we are constantly facing a lot of challenges, but we are not giving up. Your presence today gives me hope. Your presence today gives me hope. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. So I want to take us back to when you talked of Nakumat. As you know, you're distributing. Actually, the other day when I was walking, just before we contacted you, we saw your products at Carrefour. And I was wowed as a person because most of us would want to be distributors to these, let me say, supermarket chains or to even export, because I also know you do export. So take us through that. How has it been?
I guess Daniel would be well placed to talk about this, but I would say this. For these supermarkets like Carrefour, they have standards, they have requirements, which are really the foundation for you to be accepted in any of them. So you have to go through all these licenses, all these certifications, all the tests. And also, of course, you have to have a value proposition. I think for us, we were fortunate because we are not just like the others, but again, we are like others because a snack is a snack. A snack is not like an essential food. It's more of, pleasure. And when you have disposable income. So this is where when you talk about this, there are many products like us, snacks in the supermarket. But I think our value proposition helped us to differentiate slightly from the others. And I think it also needs a lot of networking. We don't go directly to most of the supermarkets. We use a distributor because distributors have already established the network. I would recommend, because we're too small, because we cannot take to Eldoret by ourselves or Nakuru or Karatina, wherever it is, it's better to go with a distributor who already has the economies of scale. So I would, for you who are looking to go into the supermarkets, I would recommend consider a distributor, working with a distributor. Of course, it depends also on your capability to do the distribution, because it's not only distribution, it's also the merchandising aspect of the product. You need staff to watch and take care of your products in the supermarkets. And it's very expensive to have one. We did at the beginning, but it was very, very difficult also to monitor the staff, because you don't know what they are doing, whether they are there or they're telling you other things. So there are other many challenges with the retail and distribution. And I would suggest that initially look at how you can work with an existing distributor that maybe is in your sector or your type of product before maybe thinking on going on your own. And I think these are the forums actually that women can even come together. When I was in Bahrain, and I think I don't want to spend too much on this, but women, the coming together and pooling together and seeing where we can leverage some of these distribution and marketing and sales activities that could be done jointly or could be complementary in some way. But that's where we were. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So just speaking on that, what is talk about a work-life balance? Is at some point you said when Nakumat went down, then you had to go back to work. Then I want you to just take us through your work-life balance and also who are your support systems?
Work-life balance. Really, I think that I think we have, as a family, we have suffered because we have often and many times separated. Because, as I said, I had to go and look for work, and I needed to look for work where I could get a little bit more money than Kenya. Because if I had to get a job here, it would not help the cost that we had. So I had to go abroad, and I feel that I sacrificed my family here, but I believe that, and I'm very grateful, like I said earlier, to Daniel and the girls. They were so understanding. They saw my dream, they saw my aspiration, and they agreed to suffer along with it. We tried to be together as much as possible. When I was in Saudi Arabia, at least I had a very good job. They could come and visit. I could come home at least 3 times. They could come whenever. But we kind of had this long distance relationship, you know that, on the phone, on video calls, and things like that. But it takes a lot. And I believe that if you are to consider work-life balance, especially on the initial stage of the business, it would be very difficult unless you have really a lot of money where you can have a lot of staff, you can have people who can take some of the responsibilities. Daniel was doing everything. He was the secretary, was the director, was the manufacturer, he was everything. So he's a man of all trades, jack of all trades, eh? And I'm grateful because he's flexible, he's agile to actually do whatever it needs. At the same time, he was full time in the factory, building all these, setting up all these, and raising 2 girls. He had to cook for them because he likes to cook for his girls. He likes to help them do whatever they need to do. So really, the support system is vital, that you have people who stand with you, even if sometimes my husband would tell me, "You are just a dreamer." Can you believe that? I come with these ideas, you are a dreamer. But he doesn't abandon me. He sticks with me, even if my dreams just look, you know. So to have such a person, I think is better than even having money. So, and I'm grateful again for him and the girls because they saw and in fact, my daughter at the beginning kind of thought I was a little bit, maybe selfish. But now I'm so happy she sees, because she has her own dreams. She's now at the age where she has her own dreams. So she can appreciate my dream and the sacrifices that I had to make. And sometimes we have to accept that to follow certain dreams and certain aspirations and certain passions, you have to be willing to give up certain things. And one of them is time, pleasure, but I also try to get pleasure in what I do. I think that is where, if you must be in an area where you enjoy or you love to do, otherwise it becomes an effort. It becomes a sacrifice. And I think that's where the difference for me. People tell me, "You're constantly on the phone, you're constantly on the internet." I say, "I love it. I enjoy what I'm," because it gives me, so you have to love what you do so that work-life balance does not become painful. you know, and also it has to be something beyond you. And that's what I think my husband sees me as a dreamer, because I have some, I don't know why. I don't know what it is that just drives me. I want Bdelo to succeed because I was fortunate to leave the country. I was fortunate to have what I have, and I want to avail it to others. When I see our people in the villages who are really have nothing, and I think we are such a wealthy country, this is also one of the motivation for me. I am fortunate and I'm lucky. And work-life balance, I'm hoping sooner than later I can really just have a day off and do what I like to do and enjoy. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So you've spoken of your family, you've spoken of your children, your husband. So out of that, who else out of that circle that you look up to or that you go to when you maybe need advice or that is your role model? Thank you.
Absolutely. I think, I must also say that it's also the extended family that are supportive. I sometimes think of, again, my husband and his family. Sometimes they think what is wrong with him, but they are very supportive. They are very encouraging. We know that if anything happens, we have a fallback. There are people that we believe will always love us and take care of us. Now, also friends, I wouldn't want to forget that. Friends that genuinely also see your vision, but also those who don't see your vision. Because sometimes I have friends who criticize, but somehow I feel like they're pushing me. I want to prove them wrong, I want to show them off, you know. So I think the mixed, you know, uh, relationships and connections you have, I always see the benefit in each one of them. Even those who speak negative, they're actually challenging you to think more deeply about what you're doing, and maybe see some things that you're not seeing. So I appreciate, I have, my family, I have relatives in the US who I know when we run out of money, they come in and chip in. They always assure us that we are there. We will be there for you. The family that hosted me in the U.S. as an exchange student, because when Daniel came, he ended up staying with us for 6 months. So they became like our parents. They're Americans, but they became like our parents. When we were building here, they came for 5 weeks, and he helped Daniel to do the wiring. He was the head of General Electric in the U.S. Okay, so they are still like my family. And every time, 2 years ago, they hosted our daughter. So we kept that relationship. They look after us. They even actually lend us some money to finish the factory. So such people are invaluable. I have also some of the institutions here. I think there are, people, everybody is valuable. I would say that. And thank you for that question. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So you are in the value addition sector and you know there are farmers that you rely on. Talk to us about that.
Our philosophy as a company is, and we're trying to be farm to fork, because we want to take pride in the value of our brand, that we know where it's coming from, who is doing what in the value chain. This is a sales proposition for us. It's a value proposition that we know who our farmers are, especially the main raw material. And the supply chain for us, as we are working with kind of niche products, we work especially with the maize. We had a group of farmers that were growing for us. For the potatoes, because I come from a potato community, I engaged a community that were growing their potatoes. Unfortunately, now that the market is unstable, but the idea we have is really to go to the farmer, to the factory, because our aspiration is to give the farmer the most value. Because today, if you look at all other products, the intermediaries often distort the prices or even distort the value for both the grower and and the manufacturer or the off-taker. So the challenge with that is, if you're a small company, you don't have the volume. Sometimes going to small groups is also expensive, not only from the price, but also the transportation, the logistics. For example, if we were to buy maize here in Kajiado, maybe maize from Tanzania or whatever, maybe we'd get it cheaper. But bringing it from West Pokot, it's 1,000 shillings per bag to Nairobi. So that is where the challenge is, that sometimes the sourcing of the material, you have to be very tactical, you have to be smart, but at the same time, really maintain that linkage to potentially what we want to do is buy Kenya, build Kenya, source as much as possible. And we hope that Kenyans will one day realize it's better to pay 1 shilling, half the pain, but half the gain ultimately, to build our country, because we are a growing economy. We don't have yet some of the economies of scale that many other countries have, the technologies they have, the knowledge they have, and we still manual in many ways. We're still very, very manual. So that also adds to the cost. And we hope that with your support as Kenya Manufacturers Association, how you can network with the government to support some of these things, particularly when it comes to, as I mentioned to you before, in Bahrain, for example, there is no tax to companies unless VAT on your product until you're making $500,000 for revenue. The idea is the government wants to make you competitive, makes you cheaper, and also they help a lot, for example, with the factories. You buy your factory, the government refunds 50% of the capital investment when you show your invoices. The idea is to make you successful as fast as possible. You hire Bahraini, they pay 75% of the salaries the first year, 50% the second year. And also they go to the Carrefour. You say you must put made in Bahrain in the best location, in the best view, in the best, because we want to sustain the economy, because you cannot come and take money and not promote the local industry. So this is where I think that CAM can help us as manufacturers to negotiate for our space in the supermarket, to give us priority, so that we can also support the economy for other products coming into the country. It has to be a win-win. So this is where I believe that, sorry, I know I'm digressing. I get very emotional when it comes to these type of things. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. You've made us want to move to Bahrain, but I want
Yes.
to talk of your wins. Tell us there what you've won. I know there are a number of what you've won and what that means to you. And also tell us where you export to or where you distribute to, so that we want to celebrate you today, so that you just know, in as much as you scaled, where have you scaled? Thank you.
Okay. In 2019, we were awarded 2 prestigious awards under Africa Fodex. And the one was the best snack of the year, obviously, because I think the value proposition we had as made in Kenya with Kenya's raw material. And also the second was best food ingredient innovation. And this was really the fact that we are using indigenous crops that are still not in commercialized per se. For example, millet. Millet is really for grandmother's porridge, even arrowroots is not seen as really the food for the high class. It's more the poor people. And I'm very happy these days when you go to some hotels, you see our arrowroot at breakfast of sweet potatoes, but it's still very small. So this is where we got the award for focusing on these crops that are not commercialized. And this is our aspiration, to commercialize our indigenous crops, our wealth, and use our indigenous way of life to commercialize and make our children be proud of eating mokimo, motokoi, and ugali, and not McDonald's. And what was the last question?
Where do you distribute to?
Okay, yeah. Where we distribute today, mainly in Kenya now. We are in all the major supermarkets, in Carrefour, in Chandarana, Naivas. We are also in Greenspoon, and also some of the small markets. We do a bit of the hospitality in hotels because we have the wraps, and and uh, and now for export, we have tried. We used to export, of course, when we had Carrefour. We had a company that was taking in Uganda. There is a small scale to Tanzania through a supplier. And also, we tried to go to Bahrain, as I said. The idea we had for Bahrain, actually, we did first a trial in Saudi Arabia. We took a full container of our fully processed products. I had a supermarket in Riyadh that was very interested. So they imported. Unfortunately, what happened was, because we are packaging products with air in high altitude and we are going to zero altitude, they kind of lost air. So they did not look well. So when it got to Riyadh, my supplier said, Wallahi, Elizabeth, Wallahi, you know. He took his hands and said, Allah Kareem, Allah Kareem. The quality is just not what it is. And it was really disappointing because they looked really bad. And you know what? And it is a reality we have to accept. Products from Kenya or Africa are not yet in that class of quality. People don't trust our quality yet, especially processed products. They like avocados because they know you can't do much with it. They like mangoes, you can't do much with it. But chips, they don't know what I have inside. This would have worked very well because one of the value we would have had, because when you take already products full of air, you only take so many. Because the first container we only took 25,000 pieces for a 20-foot container. But if we took the frozen 10 tons, we would make 250,000 of the same. So that's what we did for Bahrain. But unfortunately, it was just after COVID, the company that was going to produce closed and lost business. And also the war in Ukraine, they used to get the raw material from there. Everything collapsed. So we collapsed too. But it's still a strategy which I feel it could work if we would have our own facility. And that's what we are hoping to do. Our strategy is take the pre-processed. And this is the same thing with coffee, with tea. They don't trust already packaged tea and coffee from Kenya. That's why it's auctioned in Mombasa. And they take it and package in their own locations, because it is so important for CAM to really preach really, really good institutions, because our businesses will never be trusted, or our products will not be trusted, if our institutions are not known for the highest integrity. And unfortunately, many say blood is still thicker than justice in this country, which often does. Because if my brother is the judge, I know how I will make him forgive that. Thank you very much. So that is where I think that there is a lot of opportunity depending on the product. So we try to export, but again, because we are very minimal in funds, we looked for ways to go in. But because we are reliant on people, you're reliant on somebody's planning, equipment, and livelihood. When they fail, you fail. And this is where we hope that with funds, we could have our own factory, because Bahrain is really, really a great place to do manufacturing. As I said, they have a lot of incentives. The products have no VAT until I get 500,000. They would pay 50% of the equipment and also support in the export. For example, if I would export to Saudi Arabia, Bahrain government would fund 75% of the logistics. They refund you, because what they are looking at, they want Elizabeth Bischof to sell 5 million bags of chips. and they know what their share will be on that. They know that if you are just small around here, they won't do it. So come. That is one thing that I would also encourage you. Look at how to support these manufacturers to be on the winning side, to get a volume whereby they can sustain themselves and not suffering and not stumbling as I do. Because like in Bahrain, for example, they eliminate some of these things for certain amount of revenue. Like again, if you get half a million, then you are subjected to certain rules and regulations. But at the small level, you cannot afford this. Now, to come to your question about, with your ginger business, actually, I was talking the other day with the Kenya Tea Authority about spices and herbs, because we as Africans, if you look at each one of your communities, the spices that we have. The unfortunate thing is we have not marketed those spices the way they ought to be. Ginger is, I would say, an Asian origin, because the Asians actually, it was their herb for day-to-day living. Okay, so they came to us and sold it in that way. Now, for ginger, for instance, in my opinion, because I told KTDA, for example, Kenya imports over 100 million worth of tea today. And yet we are the third largest exporter of tea. Why? Because we export raw and they come back blended with ginger. So now it is special tea with a nice signature on it. And all that has is ginger, maybe cardamom, maybe turmeric, whatever it is. So now, if today, for example, you raise your cardamom, like me now with the ugali crust, I could not serve it just like another tortilla chips, because I would have a lot of hard work to sell it, because I need to tell people, why would you buy Bdelo and not Doritos or Ola or another one? Okay, so it is about differentiating yourself. So how do you add value to your ginger? You have to see how you can differentiate your ginger, not serving it as it is. That would be my recommendation. And this is the approach we have. We must make our chip different, so that if somebody looks at Ola, okay, Ola is this, it has its own value, which is okay, but Bdelo also has a very specific value that you're selling. It's your value proposition that is so critical. And this is why we like to, you see this, all natural. This is what would convince people. Because if I tell people, it is, but they need to see the value. Now, and this is also tough, because it needs a lot of investment to really, educate people about your product. This is one of the challenge we have. With little money, you either run the operation or marketing or sales. So this is where I think visibility, the effort from the public institutions like CAM, for example, like I said, they could at least start with buy Kenya, build Kenya. That's one value proposition that everybody should at least say, yes, I'm spoken to. The next thing is your health, your well-being, and, all these things that could differentiate us and help us to compete with the international brands. Because most of these brands have long history. They have history of money, they have history of resources, of also in the market. So how do we position ourselves? It is being different and special and unique. And even that, it's still hard work, but I think at least you would have done 50% of what could help you. And then the rest is now really the effort of marketing and distribution. And actually, we can talk about that, because I've talked to the Kenya Tea Board, and this is one of the things, is how do we make, today people are going, if you look at the herbal tea industry, it's huge, you know. In fact, black tea is not anymore just served, but it's served because people want to eat, but also nourish and also heal themselves if possible. And that's where our herbs come in. I was in Seattle 3 months ago. And if you look at the Chinese, the Japanese, how they are bringing their tea, They are not even anymore selling black tea. They are selling specialty tea because people want to eat with purpose, not just to fill their stomach, but they want to nourish themselves and heal themselves and feel that what I'm consuming is meaningful and purposeful to my body and my health. So I think we can learn from other communities. I think that this is one thing that exposure, this fireside is amazing. Thank you so much. Really important that you stay true to your cause and faithful to your aspirations and your dream. Because if money is the only motivation, the moment money is not made, you will abandon it. So I would say that let's stick together. Let us try to unite, as they have said. Let us see how we can form a force that we can really speak. Because I would also encourage CAM maybe to network and to benchmark how other countries are doing, like Bahrain, for example. We have our ambassador in Kuwait, she's a lady, Her Excellency Alima. She's very open-minded. She came a couple of times to help me out, just to stand by me. Because when you have your ambassador next to you, they say, Wallahi, this lady is very famous. People will respect you. So I think it's really important that we leverage, we network. I'm sure if you can reach out to her and say, look, we'd like to see how some countries like Middle East are supporting their women, for instance. Bahrain is very supportive of the women. When they have international exhibitions, the government pays everything for a woman's business. You know, they give them, they buy the space for them, and they have actually a weekly market, free space for women to display and sell their products. So let us network. There is a lot that other people are doing that we can learn from, you know, and we and support our women. I think that I'm not saying men shouldn't be supported, but we should all be equally supported, regardless of who we are in terms of gender or whatever. We need to learn from others. This is where I've been so inspired, but it starts from us. We must be very united. We must have a voice. And I congratulate you, the CAM, to set up the women's sector. This is a great opportunity for women really to have a voice, an independent voice, and sincere voice. So thank you, CAM. And I will just wait for any further questions that you may have. I'll be so delighted to share.